following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
It is Sunday, May 14th, 2023. We are talking the NFL schedule. It was released on Thursday. What that means for the 2023 fantasy season. Get ready, all you mothers. This is Belly Up Fantasy Live.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees, and a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. There's the whistle. That means it's time for Belly Up Fantasy Live. Good morning, everybody. I am Chase Thornton, coming to you as always from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar. Exciting time right now in the NFL. I mean, it was one of the most overhyped days probably of the NFL offseason calendar, but schedule was released last Thursday. We got bits and pieces that dripped out all week, but we finally got to see the full shebang there on Thursday night. And so everybody is looking at it, and fans are always looking at the rosters and looking at their schedule and saying, okay, well, that's a win, that's probably a win, that's a loss. And everybody's coming up with their own number in their head of where they think their teams are going to be, depending on how last year went, how your last several years have went. Your optimism and your enthusiasm may wane or wax, as appropriate. But everybody's excited right now to know who they're going to open the year against and where they're going to be. And that means that we can look at things from a fantasy standpoint too, and we can start to map out in terms of, maybe raising some players' profiles or lowering some players' profiles based on tough schedules, based on, where they're going to be on the road, what's going to happen at the end of the season. So we're going to take a look at some of that today and talk about, betting wise and fantasy wise. How do we think this season shakes out based on what we've seen from the schedule? No Kevin Wilson today. Kevin won't be joining me this morning. He's got other things that he's dealing with. I know he's working for one. So, we will not have the Kevin Wilson on, but we will have him back and we'll talk to him very soon. But I'm not alone. I do have a couple of guests with me today from the Belly Up family. First off, the host of the Captain Lou Extravaganza, which I have been on several times already. And I finally get to return the favor and have him on here as well. We're going to welcome in Lou Gamelin. Lou, how are we doing this morning?
Doing great, Chase. Thanks for having me on. This is an absolute treat.
Excellent. Yeah, we are rival fans in terms of Green Bay and Detroit, but friendly. It's a friendly rivalry.
Indeed, it is. I look forward to it.
It's a soft rivalry. There's not quite the same hatred right now going across Lake Michigan as there is going across the St. Croix River to the west for me. But that could change very, very quickly depending on how things shake out this season. And also joining us this morning, the host of the recently minted Athletic Asian podcast, we have Nathan Nguyen. Good morning, Nathan. How are we doing today?
Good morning, guys. I'm good. How about yourself?
Oh, we're doing well. We're doing real well. Okay, there we go. We'll put it up that way. All right. Yeah. So welcome in. Like I said, now you guys don't normally necessarily talk straight fantasy like we do on this show, but hey, heck with it. Everybody can take a look at the schedule and then come up with their predictions for how they think their rosters are going to do. I mentioned we've got four different fandoms here. I've got a bit of split loyalty between the Packers and the Browns, but Giants on the bottom, as we can tell by Mr. Nathan's jersey down there. And I mentioned Lou is a big Lions fan. Nathan, let's start with the Giants. Let's take a look at the Giants to start with now. Their schedule comes out, obviously, NFC East here, finished second last season. Behind the eventual Super Bowl contenders from the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles. Interesting schedule for the Giants. They re-upped Daniel Jones, their quarterback. brought him back, even though they had declined his fifth-year option. He played well enough, convinced them to come back. And their success from last season, including a playoff win over the Vikings, it's got them kind of high profile this year. There are expectations for New York, and they're going to be in the public spotlight, especially the first half of the season. We've got 5 primetime games for the New York Giants. 4 of those are going to come in the first 6 weeks here. You've got 8 home games, 9 road games, 5 primetime games, but then they're also playing on Christmas against the Eagles. And the NFL has this ridiculous, I mean, I get calling it primetime because we call primetime television, but in the mid to late evening hours, we call that prime time. But when you're playing on Christmas, when you're playing on Thanksgiving, when you're the only show in town at the time, that's a marquee matchup. And the Lions and the Packers have the same kind of thing going on. They'll be playing on Thanksgiving, but when you're playing on Christmas, you're in front of all eyes. All eyes are on you. And with the Giants finishing the season hosting the Eagles, that could be a big game for playoff seeding. For maybe in the case of the Giants, it might be a game to get into the playoffs. Obviously, Week 18 with flex scheduling for the league, there's a possibility you guys are in front of the bright lights quite often this season. What are your initial thoughts, or what were your initial thoughts when you saw the Giants schedule come out? And do you share the same optimism that the NFL apparently feels in giving you all those primetime games?
I mean, look, I love it. I live in California, so the fact that they're on prime time, to start the year a lot, it's great for me personally from a fan perspective, but from a team perspective, it's like, do we really want this? I mean, last season we were kind of, under the rug, we weren't really noticed as much. We had a few primetime games here and there, but now we have, like you mentioned, 5 primetime games, and a lot of them are in the beginning. And look at the schedule, right? We have Dallas first, and then we have Arizona, and then we have the Niners, 49ers to be exact. And from a fantasy aspect, it's like, great, because Dallas, their defense is pretty respectable. So is Arizona's to an extent. And of course, San Francisco, led by Nick Bosa. It's like, great. So is Daniel Jones going to still be on his feet by the time Week 4 comes around? Because, the offensive line it's great. I like the offensive line, but there's still a lot of young guys on that line, including the center that we just drafted, John Michael Schmitz, who is likely going to be the starter. But is he really going to be NFL ready by the time, Week 4 comes around? I'm not sure yet. And, he's a rookie, so obviously he needs time to, gather that experience and whatnot. So I'm pretty scared to start the year. But at the same time, we saw last season what Daniel Jones did under Brian Dable and Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator. And, he changed his game. Brian Dable played to his strength, something that Giants fans haven't seen with the previous head coaches, which is honestly great to see. Daniel Jones, he's a great guy, someone that you could root for. I know a lot of fans, Giants fans specifically, don't like him. I don't know why. A lot of people, were calling for a different quarterback in this year's draft. Maybe an Anthony Richardson for some reason Giants fans were calling for. I saw a few fans were being overly optimistic about that possible decision, but I digress. But look, this Giants team, it's more complete than it used to be. We have a quarterback now signed for the long term. The running back situation is a bit iffy, but I do expect Saquon Barkley to be re-signed before the deadline. I think it was July 17th. I think it's the deadline.
I believe so.
Yeah. And then the receiving core got a lot better, a lot more depth. We signed a few guys this offseason, Paris Campbell being one of them, who I really like myself. We drafted one in Jalen Hyatt. He's a speedster. He's someone I'm looking for in terms of the rookie class that I expect to really shine from a fantasy aspect if he gets a chance to possibly be the starting number 2 receiver. Because let's face it, the Giants really don't have a number 1 guy yet. Last season was the same thing, right? Now this season it's like 6 receivers. I don't know who it is.
Right. And part of my worry with the Giants from a fantasy standpoint, I mean, I think I agree with you that their wide receiver core is a lot deeper, it seems, this season than it was coming into last season. I love Daniel Jones. Personally, I've been beating the Daniel Jones drum for a couple of years now. I think he's one of the best runners at the position in the entire league. And his efficiency numbers have continued to increase, his completion percentages, and he's looked better every single season. Now, his counting numbers last season weren't necessarily as high as they had been, but I think it was a reflection, like you said, his effectiveness was better because Dable was using him the way that you probably needed to use him. Plus, again, we've both brought it up now. Their receiving core was not necessarily, top flight in the league last season. So you give him a better core of people to throw to, bringing in Waller, bringing in Darren Waller, to have that exciting playmaking option at tight end. I fully expect him to have Barkley back as well. The one thing that does worry me, though, with the Giants is that receiving core, because it seems like they've got about 876,354 slot type receivers. And I'm worried about, okay, what are they really going to do on the outside there? I have no doubt they're going to be dynamic from the slot position. They can be, but you've got to have that. You've got to have the options on the outside so that they can't key their coverage on some of those talented slot type guys you have. Who do you when you take a look at this team, who do you see shaking out as those top three options? Who do you think will be the two on the outside? Who do you think will take that slot receiver position by the horns and run with it?
And that's the thing, right? Because for me, the most important thing when it comes to wide receivers is size. The Giants never had, we really haven't had a tall receiver, like a 6'2", 6'3" guy since I can't even think of one, because all we've had is short guys. I mean, the short guys have been stars for the Giants. Victor Cruz was pretty short himself.
Yes.
Odell Beckham was 6 foot, and that's it. 6 foot is tall, but not like 6'2", 6'3" tall. So, with what we have right now, I think the top three guys, to be honest, are Darius Slayton, Daniel Jones' favorite target pretty much for the past 2 seasons. He's been great. He's fast. I like him too. I'm glad that the Giants resigned him. He's a great guy. Always protects Jones on social media. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's been recent tweets from Slayton about protecting Daniel Jones and, talking to the haters and whatnot, but that's irrelevant. Jalen Hyatt, the rookie I mentioned, I mean, there's no way he's going to start at wide receiver number 4. So I expect him on the outside as well. And then you have, a bunch of options for the wide receiver number 3 position. I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson was a second-round rookie last year. He got hurt, but he played great. Well, not great, but he played okay when he was on the field. But he got hurt early.
He flashed some ability. Yeah. He can be a playmaker, I think. I agree, yeah.
Exactly, but it's just so many guys. They brought back Sterling Shepard, which is I didn't really understand it. I liked it, but I don't understand it. You don't really need him. You have Isaiah Hodgins, who you also re-signed, even though he was a restricted free agent. He's back. He's like the tallest wide receiver on the team. I mean, there's a guy that Giants signed after the draft in Brian Ford Wheaton. He's like 6'4" from West Virginia. He tested great athletically, but obviously there's some flaws to his game, and he needs to develop if he wants to play at the NFL level. So if that guy makes the roster, then okay. Paris Campbell, I didn't even mention him. I like Paris Campbell too, but is he? We just don't know. There's so much uncertainty. So it's like when you're drafting for fantasy football, I can't give you a great answer in terms of which receivers from the Giants you should draft. I'm sure there's other options. I would say give it 4 weeks past the regular season, and then you'll see which guys from the Giants receiving wise, is gonna be someone you can depend on a weekly basis. Because there's just so many weapons. I reiterated so many times Daniel Jones needs weapons. Now he has too many weapons. I just don't know who's going to shine out of there. And you mentioned Darren Waller. See, we didn't even mention him. I didn't even mention him yet. So it's just so many guys I can't pick. But if I had to choose today, I would probably go Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, and Paris Campbell as the first 3 guys from the receiving corps to, be on top of the depth chart.
There you go. Yeah, that's the thing. Is you mentioned like Sterling Shepard. He's not exciting. He's not an exciting option, but he's steady when he's healthy. But that's been some part of his issue. And Slayton, I thought was their most consistent receiver last season. I actually picked him up in a couple of leagues where I was desperate for some wide receiver help because he seemed like he was at least steady. And Isaiah Hodgins was actually a guy that was kind of a find. He's kind of blossomed and turned into something last year where he was not necessarily a known quantity before last season. Yeah, there are a lot of unknowns on that receiving core. I think Darren Waller will be fun for you guys. This schedule, opening with Dallas is kind of, you don't want to shy away from the competition, but at the same time, it's like, man, that's a tough one to start with. You would have rather started with the Cardinals, I think, the following week. Back-to-back West Coast road trips. There's no way. Yeah, I see Lou shaking his head.
I've got hosed on that schedule. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's a murderer's row, man. I don't know.
Going to Arizona, going to the 49ers, Seattle's rough, then Miami, then Buffalo, both road games as well. There's some tough stretches for the Giants in this schedule. I've got to think between week 2 and 3, they'll just stick around out there somewhere. Probably spend some time in Phoenix after that, because the San Francisco game is a Thursday night game. Not only is it back-to-back West Coast road trips for an East Coast team, but the second of the two is a Thursday night game. So you don't even have that quick a turnaround. I mean, you've got a quick turnaround. You don't even have time to rest after that. Back-to-back road games, Miami and Buffalo, a 3-game road stretch between week 9 and week 11. They don't have a bye until week 13, the late bye for the Giants. That's gonna hurt a bit. I gotta think. I wasn't real thrilled. The Packers had a real late bye last year too. I would think the players would much rather have that be mid-season. Try and kind of give you something to shoot for, and then have your body rested to take on the second half of the season. That week 13 bye is going to be rough there too. But in terms of wins and losses, and we'll go around the horn here on that. Right now, VegasInsider.com has their over-under set at 8.5. They've got the over is plus 110. The under is going to be minus 130 on that line right there. In terms of over-under for a bet and for a record, where do you see the Giants falling here? Lou, we'll go to you first. What do you see shaking out here for the Giants?
Boy, I don't know. Nathan, I feel bad for you because that schedule does you no favors. Chase mentioned it. You've got 3 sets of back-to-back, including that 3-game stretch on the road. And then after that bye, what do you get for a reward? 2 out of your last 3 games against Philadelphia. I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, that kind of scares me to picking anybody. I don't mind Daniel Jones, but my goodness, he's going up against some stellar defenses. 8.5 is close. For positive money, I would put a couple of shackles on the over. I say you're a 9-win team, and it's not because you don't have the talent. I just think that schedule is brutal.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Nathan. Tell us what your thoughts are on your own team here.
I'll tell you what, if the Giants are 4-4 by week 9, you can't tell me that's not a win. I mean, like the schedule it's terrible. I don't like it. I mean, like I said, it's good for me because I could go to one of these games on the West Coast. It's good for me.
Right.
But it's bad for this team because like you mentioned, they're probably going to stay after the Arizona game for a couple of days, then head off to Santa Clara to face off against the 49ers and whatnot, which is convenient, but at the same time, not many players like
it's
Thursday
not the
night.
Routine. It's not the routine. Yep.
So they have to rush, their routine kind of, shy away from the norm. Also, it's an away game too. That makes it even worse for this Giants squad. So, look, if we go 4-4, past those first 8 weeks, great. I could see us, reaching that 9-win mark like last season. But, we're not going to sit here and say the Giants are going to get 12 wins. That's just too many. I mean, it'll be great. Yeah, we could be proved wrong, and I love being proved wrong in terms of this win total. But if I'm a betting guy, which I am occasionally, but
Yeah.
I would say, 9-10 wins. I'll go with 10 wins. I would say 10-7. We've shocked a lot of people. Well, the Giants, not we. The Giants shocked a lot of people last season, and I feel like, whether it's Miami or Buffalo or it's San Francisco or it's Dallas to start the year, we're gonna shock someone. So
Right.
I would say 10 wins would be the win total. But if it's more, great. If it's less, well, we're not seeing the playoffs this upcoming season. So other than that, I do feel confident. It's just a matter of who's going to perform from a fantasy aspect. Is it going to be Saquon Barkley if he stays? Yes. Is it Darren Waller? Yes. Daniel Jones? I don't know yet. Wide receiver-wise, like we just talked about, forget it. For the first 4 weeks, just forget about any of them until we figure out who it's going to be. And then, obviously, from a defensive perspective, not someone you want to draft. Obviously, many don't draft defenses in fantasy football unless you're one of those who auto drafts, but I digress. But the Giants defense is someone you don't want to draft nor pick up in the waiver wire just yet. Because like I said, Dallas is a tough matchup. Maybe against Arizona, but we'll get there when we get there. But in all, 10 wins for this Giants team is the win total I predict.
No, I'm right there with you. Actually, I looked at it. Yeah, I agree with you, Lou. That just the breakup of the road and home matchups, and then how they got grouped together. They've got some rough stretches, and that late bye is going to be is not going to be fun for them, I don't think. But when I do look at it, and I do think this team has enough to hit the over on that. If I were in a betting state, thank you, Wisconsin. I would be putting it on the over. I really would. I'd put something on the over there for, like you said, for positive money. I see 9-8, 10-7. 10-7 is where I have them pegged initially here. Hey, like we said, that last week against Philadelphia, that could very well be one of the matchups that they look at for flexing into the primetime slot there because of the fact that they came off such a positive season last year. The Eagles aren't going to have an easy road this year. They're playing a first place schedule, so they've got to play the top teams from the other divisions. And I think that I have faith in Brian Daboll. I think he was in retrospect, a great hire, a great head coach hire for them. I like Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones will be one of my top. He'll be one of my top 12 starting type quarterbacks when my rankings come out here. I agree with you. I think Barkley's back, and I think he's going to be Saquon as always if he can stay healthy, which is always an if with him. But honestly, it's the NFL. It's an if with everybody. If he can stay healthy, though, I expect him to be right back up at the top of the rankings there. But receiver-wise, we may need to take some time. They may be more waiver pickups than draftable quantities at this point here, unless you're in some kind of crazy 5-receiver league or something like that. But I agree completely. 10-7 looks good. We're going to take a break real quick. We're going to listen to our spot from Manscaped here. Our friend Mr. Mater will tell us all about them. When we come back on the other side, we'll get to the NFC North, and we'll talk Captain Lou and my teams here, the Lions and the Packers. But first, let's hear this from Manscaped.
Spring has sprung, and our friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped you tidy up all the nooks and crannies of your body's basement, but this year, Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using code BELLYUP20 to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. It's time to tame your mane with the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. The sun is peeking back out, which means you'll have to show your face in the daylight again. So use the kit to make sure your scruff looks award-winning, whether you got glorious beard flow or some smooth, sleek cheeks. The kit starts off with the Beard Hedger, a waterproof cordless trimmer with a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. So no more messy drawers full of add-ons. It also comes with the titanium-coated T-blades that are tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to a single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time. The Beard Hedger is a high-tech piece of art in a travel-size package with a long-lasting battery, universal charging, and a strong motor. So what are you waiting for? Save 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUP20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUP20 at manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
All right. Thank you to Mr. Mater for that. Yeah, get yourself over there at manscaped.com. Use that promo code BELLYUP20. Get yourself 20% off there. Yeah, you won't regret it, fellas. All right. So let's move on to our neck of the woods here now, Lou, and we'll start with the Lions. They're the more optimistic team to start with. I want to say right now, but Lions preseason darlings, kind of two seasons in a row. Actually, I think last season they got a lot of run in terms of public support, fan support around the league coming off of their appearance on Hard Knocks. I know I watched it. I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. HBO does a good job with that. But then, I mean, they've got a cast of characters there from the head coach on down that, that could draw you in. So I think they were, they picked up some goodwill that way last season. Then they go out and they exceed expectations. They were right in it for the playoffs, right up until literally the very last, the last game. Had things shaken out differently for Seattle, the Lions would have been in the playoffs after knocking my team off. So preseason darlings, 2 seasons in a row, but this season I think it's a lot more based on the fact that they look like they can win some football games this season. I don't think they're going to fly under people's radar quite so much this year. People are looking at them coming in and know that there's a strong team coming in. Got lots of primetime love this season compared to previous seasons. You've got 4 primetime games, but like we said before, playing on Thanksgiving, you're always in the spotlight. If you're on Thanksgiving Day, no matter who you are, but then especially with the Lions being one of the traditional 2 Thanksgiving teams, but then, you've got a flex possibility in week 15 against Denver. You've got obviously the week 18, like everybody else's flex position with the Vikings. And with the Vikings coming off their own NFC North title, that game very well, again, could be for not just playoff position, but it could be in or out like it was last season with the Packers, and it could be for the division. When you take a look at this schedule, Lou, what were your initial thoughts on seeing the Lions and how you think things are going to shake out for them from a performance standpoint?
Well, if you look at it on paper with all the hype, you think maybe an 11 to 12 win season. Detroit was 11-6, I believe, in 2017 or in 2014. Or 11-5 or whatever, but they didn't win the division. Obviously, Detroit hasn't won the division in 30 years. 1993, I think it was, and then we lost our playoff game to your Packers. I still have nightmares of Sterling Sharp doing jumping jacks. He was so wide open in the back of the end zone in that long bomb.
Giant toss. Yep. I remember watching that.
We were standing in the end zone on the opposite side, and I'm thinking, please don't throw it to him. And I look at it, but here's my caveat with the Lions, and I lump them in with the Jets, is how are they going to handle prosperity? This is a team and this is a culture that hasn't had a lot of success. Like I said, I go back to, I think it was 2017 when they played the Packers in Detroit on the last game of the year. It got flexed, and the winner gets the division. The loser plays at Seattle. And I thought Detroit choked that game away. Aaron Rodgers, of course, who's had their number for a lot of years. That's my biggest thing. Detroit's got the pieces. Their schedule is really not that daunting. I mean, obviously they got the Chiefs opening for everybody to see. And I think that that's going to be a good measuring stick. If they lose that game, how do they react to that? And that's what I'm wanting to see out of them. They've got 2 games, which I think they can win at home. Then they go to Green Bay on Thursday night, prime time. One of the things you mentioned, the 4 games that Detroit has on prime time besides Thanksgiving, 3 of them are on the road at Green Bay, at Kansas City, and then at Dallas on December 30th, which is a Saturday, but it's quote unquote a Monday night. The Monday night crew
Right.
are going to be there. So they get 3 out of those 4 on the road. I think they've got the wherewithal to win 11 games. I think they've got a stretch of very winnable games. They don't have a schedule like the Giants, where I mentioned, where they've got stretches of 3 straight on the road against very, very tough defenses. And from a fantasy standpoint, I like Jared Goff only for the reason is I'm not still sure on Detroit's defense. So I think they're to win some of these games, they're going to have to put some points on the board. And they may be playing from behind. It'll be close. And that for fantasy stats, him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think he's got the potential to get 100 catches, if not more. Williams, when he comes off his gambling suspension, I think could be the deep threat. The running situation, I mean, I thought Detroit had such a sensational year last year with Williams and Swift. Swift is gone, and I don't mind the trade because as talented as he was, you couldn't depend on him for more than 7 or 8 games. And now he's going to go to another situation in Philadelphia, which I'm interested to see how he handles sharing the load with those 2 or 3 other backs. He didn't like that in Detroit. Now we got Gibbs, who I'm excited for. Now, I know he tweaked his ankle already yesterday in the first workout, and already they're, the armchair general managers are harping on him, but I love that pick. Laporta, I like him at a tight end. I've watched enough Iowa games that the guy's got some speed.
Yeah.
And, so the weapons are there for them to be at the top. Again, I love the Lions. Everybody knows that. I bleed Honolulu blue, but I'm so cautiously optimistic. When I read this morning that Mike Tannenbaum is picking them to go to the Super Bowl, in my lifetime, I have never, ever seen anybody pick the Detroit Lions to go to the Super Bowl. Now, one more memory was in '92, I think it was, when after the Lions won the division, they went to the championship game. They had high expectations, and we went to Detroit, or we went to Lambeau, and got destroyed, and the season went in the tailspin. So, I'm excited. I love the spotlight. As a Lions fan, that's what we want. We want Detroit to be relevant, but now that's not enough. It's nice to have high expectations, and I think 11-6, 12-5 with that schedule is very realistic.
I tend to agree with you when I look at it. I mean, obviously I follow the division, being in the division here with the Packers, but I see them at 11-6. I've got them pegged for that. I've got them as the top team in the division. I really do. I don't think that Minnesota can, and we talked about it beforehand before the show here, I don't think Minnesota can repeat their extreme luck with 1-score games. And I just think that the Packers, obviously losing Rodgers, they didn't do a ton, and we'll talk about them in a minute, but they didn't do a ton to get better this off season. And they've got a new unknown quantity at quarterback, the most important position in professional sports. So I really do. I see the Lions at 11-6. I would right now, Vegas Insider has their over under for the year at 9. I would go on the over on that, all day. I think that they are, like you said, 10-7, 11-6, but I've got 11-6. Maybe I'm a little more optimistic than some, but different expectations for Detroit. I agree with you. I like their, the thought of their passing game. I wish they had more weapons and more known weapons on that pass team from a fantasy standpoint. I think from a real football standpoint, they'll be fine. I think Jared Goff doesn't get enough credit for how steady he is. We all know that, he got traded and he was cast aside by the team that drafted him, but he took them to a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And when you ask him to do what he should be asked to do, I think there's nothing wrong with him as a quarterback. And they showed faith in him by bringing him back. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I love. I'll have him as a top 15 type option. Jameson Williams has been a bit of a disappointment so far through 2 years. Now, we knew last season he was going to miss a ton of time with the injury, coming off the injury. But you brought up that Gamelin suspension. Come on, kid. You haven't even gotten your foothold in the league yet. Let's stick with it.
Here's my feeling on that. He's not a kid anymore. All right.
Right.
And what is the first thing you see in these clubhouses, not only in the NFL, but in Major League Baseball, all the sports?
Giant poster.
Gamble.
Yep.
Gambling. And okay, yeah, it's legal in Michigan. I get it. But it's just like with my day job as a truck driver. You can't drink and you can't get high. That's our rule. So, as crazy as it sounds, and it's right there. That's their rules. I don't care if it's archaic or not. You can't gamble. And the guy's, he's a knucklehead for doing that. And, he's lucky he only got 6 games. He could have got a year. And so that
we just saw that with Calvin Ridley. Yeah,
exactly. And, a handful of the other guys from Detroit that were lesser names that got let go. I mean, that to me is just, you're not thinking, you're not using your head. You surround yourself with people that will tell you that. But you're right. I worry about that, but I think maybe getting Marvin Jones Jr. back will kind of help him, mentor him a little bit.
Right.
And I like that pickup. I love Detroit's offensive line. This is one of the more solid ones they've had. But, the defense still scares me. I love the Jack Campbell pick in the first round. It's funny. I've never heard a linebacker get such skepticism. That's won a Butkus Award. I mean, linebacker in the country. His left or his east to west speed is incredible, And so I like the pick. I love how they picked for need over value. And again, the optimism is there. I love the offseason pickups on the defensive side of the ball. It's hard not to be excited. And another plus is they don't have to go to Lambeau in the dead of winter. They play them 1st of October on a Thursday night, so that helps. It's always a bonus.
Right.
It doesn't fare well. And the other thing with Goff, real quick, is he's Detroit drafted Hayden Hooker in the 3rd round, or Hendon Hooker, and Goff is coming up to the point where he wants another contract.
Right.
And I think he's going to use that as motivation. And also Ben Johnson not going as a head coach somewhere and coming back to Detroit is huge. And I think he's he's a great mind for the game, and Detroit's lucky to have him. That's another plus.
No, I agree. When they were able to bring him back, when he didn't get a job somewhere else as a head, I think that continuity is going to be real good for this team. I think that's gonna really help things. I like the Sam Laporta pick as well. I like him. I don't necessarily know if you want to draft him in fantasy right off the bat. I think that for dynasty purposes, he's a great pickup in the 2nd round. I would go 2nd round with him for a dynasty rookie draft, because this is a team that wants to throw to the tight end.
Yeah.
They traded away Hawkinson last season across the division, which was awkward, but it happened. And after they got rid of him, literally, they threw more touchdowns to the tight end than any team in football. It's just it was spread among 3 dudes who are just kind of dudes who happen to play tight end for them. I really liked that Sam Laporta pick. It was a deep tight end draft. They went out and got themselves a good one, an athletic one, like you said. He's a Midwest guy, haven't gone to Iowa. I'm excited to see what Sam Laporta can do this season. And we talked about schedule wise, getting that bye week 9, right dead in the middle of the season, quite literally right in the middle of the season. It's perfect for them, I think. They don't have any of those brutal stretches where they're going 3 on the road or anything like that. Having to play Minnesota twice in the last 3 weeks of the season, and then having to play at Dallas there at the end, that's going to be tough. Yeah. That's going to be tough, just because Minnesota doesn't have a great defense or anything per se, and then they may actually be able to pass the ball quite a bit there. but it's 2 division games.
Mhm.
And when your season's going to come down, I think those last 3 games in terms of make or break for winning the division and playoff seeding. But hey, I mean, they've, from a fantasy standpoint, they've got the second easiest schedule against running backs all season. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, who we didn't even mention because he's not a draft pick, but you've got yourself the same kind of setup that you had last season if you want it, where you could use one or the other of them as your DeAndre Swift pass type back. And neither of them is necessarily as dynamic in the pass game as Swift can be. But hopefully, like you said, you get more than 8 games out of one of them this year. And then the other one, Jamal Williams led the league in rushing touchdowns last year as the running back. You've got yourself 2 good ones there, and David Montgomery, who can do it all, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think can do it all, and I think is an NFL caliber player. I think the grief that they got over their first round draft picks was only because they went with 2 positions that the rest of the league tends to see as replaceable parts. The positional devaluing of the running back and middle linebacker position in the NFL, and especially even more so, it's probably magnified in the fans' view because we just know what we hear from the media. But I think that the positional devaluing of the running back and the linebacker is what caused people to not like the Lions draft as much as they probably should have. Like you said, they drafted for need over value necessarily. But when you're a team that is in a win now type mode, sometimes you got to take those kinds of shots. I mean, ostensibly they've been drafting for value for a long time, but they've got a shot this year. I like that. Nathan, when you look at the Lions schedule here, what do you have with an over under of 9? Where do you think they can land this year when you take a look at the Lions schedule?
Oh, definitely the over. Against Kansas City, the last time Jared Goff played the Chiefs, it was like 52-49 when he was with the Rams, and that was fun. If I see that again, I would like that personally, but that's just me. So besides that, though, Detroit is the schedule. I want to switch schedules, Lou. If we could switch schedules, that would be great.
Yeah, no kidding.
If we could switch, I mean, I would say the Giants will be in the playoffs automatically with Detroit's schedule, but I like the Lions schedule. I really do. A lot of winnable games. You mentioned the last stretch in terms of Minnesota, 2 times in the last 3 weeks, and then you have Dallas as well. But you're going to win one of the games against Minnesota. You're going to win one of them. I mean, they're not that great.
Right.
Because last season, 1-score games, they were really good in that situation, as well as the Giants were as well. But both teams are going to, I guess, struggle a little bit with that compared to last season. So the Lions have to win one of those games. They're going to. I think so.
Right.
And look, I'm seeing Broncos. I'm seeing what else am I seeing? I'm seeing Broncos. I'm seeing Saints. I'm seeing Raiders. I'm seeing Buccaneers. I'm seeing the Panthers. Bryce Young, a rookie. I don't see why the Lions wouldn't get 9 wins. I would say they would possibly get 11, 12 wins, to be honest. Is that being overly confident? Maybe, but Dan Campbell, he's a great coach. Jared Goff has been very serviceable at quarterback, and even if you don't see him as the long-term, fit for this Lions team, he's been great in the short term. He's been great. Amon-Ra St. Brown, very, very, really good. He's a guy that I love at the wide receiver position. And you talk about running backs, and in terms of people who were upset with the Lions' first-round picks, I was kind of one of them. I was wrong because, like you mentioned, the need over value situation was something that Lions plans took into place with their draft plans. So I do understand it. I kind of wish DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams were still there. More specifically Swift, because why the heck would he go to Philadelphia and make my life worse? I don't know. But I won't rant too much about that. It's just I don't know why he went to Philly, though. I mean, you could have traded him somewhere else, but I digress.
It could be interesting. It could be interesting to see in Philadelphia. Now that they've got Swift and Rashad Penny, a couple of guys who have both had a lot of trouble playing more than about 9 games a season. Yeah. How do they shake up that workload? Yeah, I mean, Swift may end up getting a full workload by default if Penny gets hurt again, or vice versa. So that should be interesting to look at there.
Exactly. And I don't really like the whole 2 running back stuff. From a fantasy aspect, I mean, I don't mind if it works, but if it's like, you mentioned Gibbs and Montgomery for the Lions, which one is going to be the lead back? That's something that kind of scares me from a fantasy perspective. I don't really, but if it works, from a non-fantasy perspective, then okay.
It's the way the league's been going in terms of just operationally. I think a lot of teams have gone to a more 2-backs system. We see it in Green Bay has done somewhat of the same thing with Dillon and Jones. They haven't necessarily locked one of them into a role per se, but the 2 running back thing is something that's become more and more prevalent across the league. But from a fantasy standpoint, it hurts. I watched this draft this season, and I've said it on this show before. I'll say it again. I didn't like a single running back landing spot from a fantasy standpoint because we ended up seeing, we saw some guys, Zach Charbonnet and Bijan, some guys that we thought could come into the league and be number 1 guys and be startable and usable fantasy options, but they all went places that already had startable, usable fantasy options at the position. David Montgomery is an all-purpose back. Seeing Gibbs go to Detroit, it's like now instead of 2 different starting caliber fantasy running backs, we've got kind of 2 3/4 of a starting fantasy running back. Same thing with Charbonnet going to Seattle with Kenneth Walker already there. And the same thing with Bijan going to Atlanta because they already had 1,000-yard young running back in Tyler Algier. But from a real football standpoint, I think it's going to be excellent for the Lions there. So then staying in the division, we'll take a look at my team now, my main team here, the Green Bay Packers. Another team that kind of lucked out from a schedule standpoint now. The Packers don't have a single stretch of 3 straight road games. They've got 3 different back-to-back road games, but including to open the year, but you're going to Chicago and to Atlanta. Those are both winnable games, even on the road. You're talking about, a Bears team that had the number 1 overall pick until they traded it away, but only won 3 games last year. They're still finding themselves as a team. Historically, they've held in the last 30 years, they've held they've held the upper hand in that rivalry, but we'll have to see how things shake out with Jordan Love this year. Then you go to Atlanta. That's again a winnable game. You've got a young quarterback, Desmond Ridder, who's going to be starting for the first time as the guy. He's had a handful of starts late last season. This is the first time that he is going to be the guy running the show. You go to Las Vegas and you go to Denver for back-to-back games, but they've got their bye in between there, which will help things tremendously there. And then their only other back-to-back road trips here is at Carolina and at Minnesota in week 16 and 17. And the week 17 game is a night game. So they'll get Kirk Cousins in prime time, which always chalks up to a win. They still get 5 primetime games, which is from a Packer fan standpoint. It's nice. It's nice to be able to see the team, still getting that kind of national love. It means you got a crazy schedule all season, though. You don't settle into that routine of play your game on Sunday, you get your off day on Monday or whatever, or you get your walk day on Monday and your off day Tuesday, however your team sets it up. You come in Wednesday, Thursday professional athletes are creatures of habit. And when you've got this many games that are on Thursdays and Mondays and Thanksgivings and night games, and you don't necessarily get as much of that rhythm as you like to have. But I think they've got a very winnable schedule, even with the transition at quarterback. And now, obviously, that's the linchpin of their entire season is how does Jordan Love develop as a starting quarterback? They already weird situation with his contract. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option, but they kind of gave him half of one by signing him to that extension. It's like neither team was really, it's like neither side of that negotiation was all that confident in what Jordan Love was going to be able to do, including Jordan Love himself. If he wanted to really bet on himself, he would have said, okay, fine, don't pick up the option. I'll pull a Daniel Jones from last season and play great and earn a top payday. But he didn't do that. They didn't do that. So the whole season's going to revolve around him, but they do have a winnable schedule here. Easiest fantasy schedule in the league. From a fantasy standpoint, the teams that they're playing, the defenses they're playing, the points allowed to different positions, the Packers have the easiest fantasy schedule in the league. So if they get competent quarterback play out of Jordan Love, there's opportunity here for some fantasy points to be scored if you want to look that direction. We're dealing with the same kind of thing that the Lions are dealing with in terms of we're going to have a young starting tight end. We'll see how long it takes them to develop with Musgrave and Tucker Kraft as well. For that matter, Josiah DeGuara isn't all that old. So we'll see from the tight end position, but otherwise we know Aaron Jones is a capable fantasy player. He's a good starting option. He's a top 12 type option. Should be interesting to see though. It's all going to come down to that quarterback. When you take a look at this right now, Vegas Insider has them at an over-under of 7.5.
Oh.
7.5 for an over-under. They're giving you plus 115 on the over. Under is going to run you negative 135. When you take a look at this, and I heard your reaction there, so we'll go to you first, Lou. What do you see for this Packers team here, and where would you be laying the money?
Well, I'll tell you what. I look at their schedule, and I looked at it again here while you were talking about it. First 8 games, very easily 5-3, potentially 6-2. Seriously. Then the next 5 are going to be the stretch where, they've got some tough, I look at that stretch of those 5 games where, they've got the Chiefs, the Lions at Detroit, at Pittsburgh, and at the Giants, and then they throw the Chargers in. Let's say they go 1-4 there. So that's 6-7 wins. Those last 4 games, I could see the Packers going 3-1. Buccaneers at home, at Carolina, at Minnesota, and home to Chicago. I mean, I see that as a 9-10 win schedule. And I got to tell you, Chase, you might have to DM me if you want me to put a couple shackles on that over under for you. I'm taking you over. That plus 115. Even if they go 8 wins, you're winning. And right. I love your point about the, fantasy wise. I think, the defenses, they don't, besides that middle stretch that I mentioned, they're not playing defenses that remind me anything close to the 85 Bears. No. So, I think, this is a great way for Love to get a, quote unquote baptism of fire with the first couple of games. They're on the road against defenses that are not the greatest. I love your running back situation. You got young receivers, and I love the second round pick you guys got when you got Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. Yep. I've watched him play for 3 years here locally, and the guy can put up some fantasy numbers for you, and he's a big play guy. Love that pick, and I think he's gonna do wonders. So I'm taking you over. 9-10 wins. And as crazy as it sounds, the NFC North could have, 3 teams with winning records.
I agree completely. I'm trying not to be a homer when I take a look at my own team, but like you said, just the way that the schedule shakes out, their opening stretch of games, they have a week 6 bye. They've got one of the earliest byes in the league. Week 5 and 6 are the first 2 bye weeks. Packers have the week 6 bye, and there is every possibility that if they get even competent quarterback play out of Jordan Love, they could be, like you said, 4-1, 5-0 going into their bye week.
Yeah.
And I mean,
crazy.
Yeah. If you get there, now you've got the rest of the season to pick up, like you said, 3 wins, 3 or 4 wins complete for the rest of the season just to hit the over on that. Yeah. I'm putting my money on that all day. I've got them when I look at the league. And when I look at the schedule, I see 9-8. kind of all the teams we're talking about today. We're not talking about the Chiefs and the Bills and the Eagles level, where we're talking teams that we know are going to win 13 games and are going to dominate all year. We're talking about teams that could be anywhere from that, 8-9 all the way up to 10, 7, 11. It's, they're all kind of right in that mid section there. And teams in that mid section, they always seem to find a way to win a game that you didn't think they were going to win that season. By that same token, they always seem to lose a game that you didn't think they should have lost. And those two things balance out. So to me, when I look at a schedule, I don't necessarily think of it like, well, they're going to win a game. They're going to lose a game that you don't think they're going to win. That all evens out in the end, I think. You look at it, your first initial thoughts on that schedule, it's a winnable schedule if they just get competent play. Yeah, I like the over on that. What's your thoughts there on that, Nathan? We're gonna face the Packers will face the Giants on Monday Night Football in Week 14. But when you look at the rest of their schedule, other than that impending loss, I would think, what do you see for the Packers?
Look, if Jordan Love goes 4-1 or 3-2 to start the year, Packers fans are gonna love Jordan Love, no pun intended.
Right.
Look, you brought up a lot of ifs when it comes to Jordan Love, and I totally agree. If they get competent play from Jordan Love, because for quite a while now, Jordan Love has been in the back seat behind Aaron Rodgers for so long, and now he's been thrusted into the starting role, and a lot of people really don't believe in him. I kind of don't, but it's because he's been behind Rodgers for so long, and it's Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to play in front of him unless Rodgers gets hurt, and we've seen that either last season or the year before when Love played against Kansas City. Love wasn't that great, but they almost got the win. It's just he did
Right.
not. Side note, I do hope the Giants beat the Packers, but if we don't, it's okay. I respect Green Bay. I respect their organization, but I just hope, the Giants get a win there.
Yeah.
But
Where do you see them shaking out, do you think? I mean, over under 7.5. Where are you on that?
I'm going to go over. I would say 9-8 is definitely a serviceable goal. I think just looking at the schedule, not too crazy. It seems like the NFC North has an easy schedule, it seems like, which I'm jealous of. But 9-8 is definitely reachable. 10 wins also is a possibility, but that's if Jordan Love can just perform to the first round talent that he was selected from Utah State. Not a lot of quarterbacks come from Utah State, so 9-8.
It hasn't been a factory, yeah.
9-8, 10-7 is definitely a reachable goal for the Packers, and Vegas does not want us to take the under for some odd reason, I guess, when it comes to the Packers in Detroit. So, yeah. Well,
that's part of the the game that you're playing when you're looking at betting, when you're looking at fantasy. We don't want to get locked into that. If everything shakes out just right, this is the best thing that could possibly happen. You want to ask yourself, what's the most likely thing that's going to happen? And, we've all been talking here about, 9-8, 10-7, for this team, for the other two teams as well. But over under of 7.5, if we're all talking about them being a 500 team, like you said, Lou, even if they get to 8 wins, that's a win.
Yeah.
8 wins on the over is a win. They don't have to be above 500. They don't have to be a playoff team to hit a winning bet on that over under there. What's most likely to happen? I think what's most likely to happen is they're right around a 500 team. They're not great, but they're not terrible. They've got a winnable schedule enough to hammer some games out. It's weird having that expectation going into the season as a Packer fan, but so be it. Things are what they are. And then we'll finish up here talking about teams real quick. I want to bring up my other team, the Browns here. 9 home games, 8 road games. They've got themselves, a different schedule, a bit of a different schedule as well here. they don't really have a rough stretch of games. They've got early in the season, they've got it set up for themselves where they've got 4 of their first 5 games are at home. They've got a week 5 bye that comes right in the middle of that. They go to Pittsburgh for a Monday Night Football game early on. But this is a team that underwhelmed last season. They've had some preseason expectations the last couple of years. People kind of got re-excited about the Browns. And then they've underperformed. Their defense was not what people thought it was going to be last season. Jacoby Brissett kept their heads above water, as was the hope. But when Deshaun Watson came back, he looked understandably rusty. It's another team that how Deshaun Watson looks to start the season, and if he looks like he can come back to any shadow of what he was as a fantasy player and as a real life quarterback, if he can get back to there, now they might have something going in Cleveland. But again, Vegas Insider has them at over under of 8.5. They've got the over at plus 115, the under at minus 135 on that again. Nathan, let's start with you. Cleveland, over under of 8.5. Are you buying that, or are you going to sell that?
I'm probably going to sell that one. I'm going to go under. Look, I thought I was the smartest guy in the world when I picked up Deshaun Watson on the waiver wire last season. Being ready so that when he comes back, I can start him and possibly make a run in the fantasy playoffs. That didn't work out because actually Watson costed me a game in the fantasy playoffs. So thanks, John. I appreciate it. I hope your $200 million is treating you well. But look, I don't know about Cleveland. I just don't. Is Watson going to be to the level that he was in Houston? I don't think so. Yes, you still have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, which is likely going to be the key. The receiving core questions me a little bit. So does the tight end position as well. Defensively, like you mentioned, they weren't the same like they're used to in previous seasons. Myles Garrett's still there, though, at least. But it's just a lot of questions in Cleveland. I don't feel confident. And if they get the over, great. Prove me wrong. But I just don't feel confident this time in terms of the Browns. And
I can't disagree with that at all. Lou, what's your thoughts on the Browns here when we take a look at where if we're gonna lay any money?
I'd say they're going to go on the over, and I'm going to tell you why. They've got. I'm going to bank on them potentially going 3-3 against their divisional opponents. Okay, and then they've got 6 games against 6 of the worst teams in the league. So let's say 4-2. All right, and so that leaves them with 5 games. If they can pick up 2 wins, then they're at 9. They're at 9-8. Here's their road games besides their division. At Denver, potentially a win. At Los Angeles Rams. I mean, that doesn't scare me. At Houston. I know they've got the Jaguars and I know they've got the Jets, but those games are at home. And another road game, the Colts. I mean, come on. Yeah. At Seattle's going to be a tough one. I get it. I don't know why I'm optimistic, but I look at that schedule and again, if they can go 3-3 against their divisional opponents, that's the big thing. I think those bottom feeders that they've got, they go 4-2, 5-1. They're looking at 7 or 8 wins right there. And then they could pick up, 1 or 2. It's close, man. I'm not touching it only because I think they can get 9 or they think they could get 8.
Right.
But I honestly think if you had to have me bet for plus 115, I'd put a couple of dollars on them and say they're going to get to 9 wins. That's, again, what Deshaun Watson you're going to get. And the running backs, can Nick Chubb stay healthy and carry him again? I say 9-8. Maybe I'm being a little optimistic.
No, I agree with you on that in terms of my optimism wants to say, I look at it. Yeah. My first thoughts are 9-8. They do have a very winnable schedule from the standpoint of, like you said, who they have to go on the road against. Mm-hmm. They play in a tough division in the North, but they're out of division games, like you said, are very winnable. They're playing the AFC South, so they get which is one of the lower divisions, top to bottom in the league. So they get Indianapolis, they get Houston. They'll be able to play at home against Jacksonville. They'll be able to play at home against Tennessee, who are the two teams that should be at the top of that division. I don't like the week 5 bye. It's always welcome to have that day off. Especially in pro football, these guys are hurting by that point in the season. Everybody's hurting by that point in the season, but it's just, you get done with that. Now you've got a long slog to the end of the season. But yeah, I look at it. They could go 9-8, and that's where I think I have them pegged. But again, if everything goes right with that line at 8.5, I don't want to touch that one because neither of these teams, my teams here, the Packers, the Browns, it wouldn't shock anybody if they came out and went, 5-12, 6-11. Wouldn't shock anybody if they came out and went 10-7.
Yeah.
It really wouldn't. Nobody would be surprised either way, I don't think. So yeah, I'm not touching that one, but yeah, 9-8, I think is about right where they could go. And bye weeks real quick here. The two worst bye weeks that we all hate from a fantasy standpoint, the two bye-mageddon weeks, week 7 to week 13, there's going to be 6 teams off. At least they're not bending us over like they did last season. Last season, week 14, there were 6 teams off. It was a killer. A lot of leagues are starting their fantasy playoffs then, and if they're not, it's your last week, and you're trying to get into the playoffs, and now you're missing a fifth of the league and some of your top weapons. They did it to us again, kind of this season with that week 13 bye, having Chicago, Buffalo, the Giants, Vegas, Baltimore, and Minnesota off. So now you're looking at possibly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're looking at 5 of the top 12, likely top 12 fantasy quarterbacks are off that week. And if you've gotten to that point and you're riding high, you've probably got a good starting quarterback. So there's a good chance you have one of them. They're going to be off for you in week 13. So everybody's got to watch that. But otherwise, otherwise they've done a decent job of spreading things out. I think I don't know. I'm not in on the algorithm for how they set the schedule up, but that week 13, having that many teams have to wait that long in the season for their bye week too. I don't understand the thinking behind that. I would think that you would not want to make these teams wait all that long to get their off week. You don't have anybody off in week 8. You don't have anybody off in week 12. And I get that week 12 is like Thanksgiving week, and they don't want to screw around with giving teams off too much that time, but come on, man, 6 teams off on week 13. Any other schedule related thoughts when you take a look at things? Do you care about where the bye weeks are, and when you're thinking about drafting your teams, or when you're thinking about laying bets? Do you watch the bye weeks at all, or do you kind of just ignore that and let it shake out where it may? Lou, let's go to you real quick for that one.
Well, I'm in a couple of fantasy leagues. Yeah, I pay attention to the bye weeks from a fantasy football standpoint. I look at, first of all, I usually keep Patrick Mahomes every year, and I look, when he's off and who the competent quarterbacks are going to be, and it's helped me because I've gotten burned by it before. Definitely look at the bye weeks for that. Betting on games, I don't pay as much attention to that, and I take a more conscious look at the schedule, and I'll bring up Patrick Mahomes real quick. 6 of it in that middle of the schedule for them. He's playing 6 potential Hall of Fame quarterbacks in a 7 or 8 week stretch, or close to Hall of Fame. So I think there's going to be some fantasy numbers put up on that. And so that's one of the things that I kind of keep an eye on there. But yeah, the bye week, I do pay attention for fantasy, not so much for betting purposes on the spreads or whatnot.
Yeah, I don't necessarily let it affect my draft strategy, but Nathan, what's your philosophy on that?
No, I think simplicity is key. I don't really pay attention to it. I get the best player. If we all have bye weeks in the same week, then oh well, I better hit the waiver. I love the waiver wire. Honestly, if we're gonna in fantasy league this upcoming season with Belly Up, trust me, I will be hitting the waiver wire like there's no tomorrow. That's been my key to success is the waiver wire. So for example, you mentioned the Ravens and who else did you mention had the bye week in week 13?
The Bears, the Bills. Bills will be a big one because that's a lot of offensive weapons that'll be off for people in week 13. Yeah.
So like Stephon Diggs, Odell Beckham Jr. If I draft those two guys and they have the same bye week, I'm not even sweating because by then I hopefully should be in a good position to lock myself into the fantasy playoffs. So I wouldn't be sweating about it too much. I think it's just about getting off to a good start from a fantasy football perspective. If you're 9-1, 10-0, so on and so forth. If you just have a good record. Once you reach that bye week in week 13, which you mentioned is the Armageddon of fantasy football, then I really don't pay attention to that from a quarterback perspective, like we mentioned about Patrick Mahomes. If that's why I kind of draft two quarterbacks. My plan is to draft two quarterbacks. I might be giving that away, which is probably a bad idea. So now my plans are ruined. But drafting two quarterbacks definitely solves that issue because quarterback is the most important position from a fantasy perspective. Because if Mahomes and say you draft, if you're lucky enough, Lamar Jackson, and they both have the same bye week, it's like, oh, well, this didn't work out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I agree. I just the way I always look at it too is even if you lock yourself into something like that, like, oh, shoot, my two starting running backs both have, the same bye in week, even if it's week 5, you got yourself a month to work that out, figure it out. Or just punt that week, worry about it, and not worry about it and know that you've got your top 2 guys in the lineup for the other 16 games on the schedule. I don't necessarily worry about bye weeks as much. What I do like to do is if you're in a league that does kickers and defenses, not everybody's does anymore, but if you're in a league that does kickers, defenses, one of the things I do like to do is I like to try to look at what kickers do you want to really have. I mean, I don't like to worry about the kick. I don't like streaming kickers. I don't like doing any of that kind of stuff. I want to just set it and forget it. Right. So what kicker is on a good offense who has an early bye week that I can pick up that week after that week and not worry about it, just let it ride for the rest. I'm not going to try and play. They're too unpredictable. I don't want to have to try and read the tea leaves and stream my kickers. Defenses, if you get the right defense at the top of the league, I would like to be able to do the same thing because I like not having to worry about it. But the problem with defense is it happens every year where the teams that were great on defense last year don't necessarily end up being the great fantasy scorers this season. That's going to do it for us today, though. We're going to wrap it up there. Before we get out of here, I'd like to hear from you two guys and what you've got going on, where people can find you, and what we've got coming up, especially say later this week. Lou, let's start with you. What can fans expect from you this week, and where can we find you?
Well, I've kind of changed the broadcast times of our show, the Captain Lou Extravaganza. I'm on rehab, if you will, physical rehab for foot surgery. So I'm on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. I actually got a great week planned. Wednesday, I've got a couple of great guests. I've got Rod Peterson, the host of the Rod Peterson Show. He's based, it's on, you can see that on Facebook Live, and he's a veteran of play-by-play in the CFL for a lot of years. We're going to talk Stanley Cup playoffs with him. And then I've got Ryan Schuling, who's producer of 6.3 KHOW in Denver. He also was in Michigan for a lot of years as a radio personality. We're going to talk transfer portal with him and how it's taken over with Coach Prime out in Buffalo out in Colorado. And that's going to be interesting. And also with the Nuggets going to the NBA Western Conference Finals. And then on Friday, I've got an old friend, Mitch Bernstein from the Burn with Mitch podcast. He's a big Major League Baseball guy, and it's almost a quarter pole for Major League Baseball. So he's going to come on our show on Friday, and we're going to get up to date on all of that and the goings on in baseball. But we're on 3 days a week, 10 o'clock in the morning on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube, powered up by Belly Up Sports, 10 a.m. That's Captain Lou Extravaganza.
Excellent. And Nathan, where can we find you and what do you got coming up here?
Yes, sir. I mean, the NBA playoffs is almost coming to a close. So this week on the Athletic Asia podcast, we'll be covering all that stuff. The Lakers are moving on after defeating the Warriors, which is good for me. I'm a Lakers fan, which may not make sense because New York Giants fan, Lakers fan, West Coast, East Coast doesn't make sense. It makes sense to me, but I'll explain that.
And that's all that counts.
Exactly. So we have that going on. Then once basketball season ends, we'll be covering a lot more baseball. And then once the NFL season, probably July, August, that's when we'll be diving a lot more into football. And I'm very excited for that as well. So you can find us, the Athletic Asia Podcast, on YouTube and Spotify. And hope you guys, come tune in. And just thank you so much, Chase, for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate both you guys coming on. It helps out a lot. Nobody wants to hear me drone on for an hour straight by myself without Kevin around. You can always find me, as it says there on the screen, at STT Chase FFB on the Twitter machine there. Check back for articles at bellyupfantasysports.com all the time. Get over there to Belly Up Sports, Belly Up Fantasy Sports, and check out, all the other great podcasts that are available and the great writing content. There's a lot of fantasy baseball content going on right now from my co-host Kevin Wilson and Ian Lemersall as well. If you're doing the fantasy baseball thing, I've got a big matchup today. I'm hoping I can pull out the win. I've got fingers crossed here because I need to start putting some wins together in the Belly Up Fantasy, in Sports Stove League. But that's where you can find me, and that's where you can find the rest of us. I appreciate you gentlemen both coming on, and I would tell everybody to get over there and check out both of your shows because you guys are both doing really good things, and I appreciate you being here. And we will get you on again. We will definitely get you on again. Until then, we'll be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel, and I will wish everybody, first off, a happy Mother's Day to everybody, including my lovely wife. And secondly, I'm going to tell everybody, hey, Slanjava, we'll see you next week.